commune with God together. I don't know any other social club, job, education where you show up and go, man, how do you guys what do you guys do here? What are you about? It's like going over to somebody else's family and see how they eat dinner together, and then you kind of question whether or not you should eat dinner like those people eat dinner. It is weird. So you always want a friend, at least one person you know there who can go, doesn't matter if everybody else is weird and, I don't know, doesn't like me or something, I at least have one person I can sit next to and I can be okay. And so when you begin the process of going, man, Lord, where are we supposed to go to church? And we had mutual friends of ours invite us to visit this church, and we went, okay, let's try it, because if all else fails, at least we know they'll be there and we can sit next to them and talk next to them. We can be okay. So we show up, we time it perfectly, 5 minutes before the service starts, right? Because you got to park, walk in, say hi to the greeters, good morning, do the handshake, and then sit down, hopefully, as the first song starts. You time it up perfectly, right? There's an art to this thing. So that's what we do. We walk in, greet everyone, and we do a quick scan of the room. And our friends are not there. So now we have two options. Run or find a seat. So we decided, you know what, put on our adult pants this morning. We're gonna find a seat. We're gonna do this. We're gonna lean in. And it was midway through this service. I couldn't even tell you what the sermon was about. But the pastor said, hey, we're going to get into groups about 3 to 5 people, and we're going to pray. So here we are with people we've never met before, and they're like, yep, we're just going to get in a circle, and we're going to pray together. And we had two options. Get in the car and run, or stay. So we decided, all right, we'll stay. And then after the service, you can either beeline it for the door, or option B, you could stay and get to know somebody's name. We decided to stay a little bit, know somebody's name. And we left that place with the feeling of, this is where we're supposed to be. Worship music wasn't that amazing. The preaching wasn't that amazing. The building wasn't that cool. They didn't have the perfect logo, this great outreach program. It was simply that we knew this is where God wanted us to be. I don't know where you're at with your walk with God, but I wonder if you started in a space like that, a little uncomfortable, a little awkward, but you're trying to find your way. And so this morning, I have the honor of sharing with you what staying did for me. But the last some of the things that God showed me the last 9 years. I mean, I thought I would get emotional at the end. I didn't. So looking back on what was a journey, would you join me on that? Lesson number 1, God cares more. We just read out of Luke 15, and often if you read that parable, right above it is this little line called the prodigal son. I think it's a terrible name for it. Because if you were paying attention to what was read, there are 2 sons. Both were angry with their dad. One said, essentially, Dad, I want you dead. You're dead to me, so I want half your stuff like I get when you die. And he goes off and squanders it. Of course, he comes back. But there's the second son who's angry with Dad because he didn't get what he thought he deserved. Both sons are caught up in their own little world, doing their own little thing. And they miss the whole point. which is that their Father loves and cares for them more than they could ever understand. The title of this parable should be The Loving Father, not the prodigal son. When I showed up in Sheboygan, the word I would use to describe the state of myself would be disillusioned. Disillusioned with God, faith, church. You see, when you care about something, you start to see the inconsistencies. You start to see injustice. You start to see problems. You start to see hurt. And that gets you into trouble. Because when you see all those things, that starts to create pain. And then pain, left unchecked, for me turned to anger. And you're not allowed to be angry as a Christian. At least that's what I thought. So I had to suppress that anger. Not very well. But I tried to suppress that anger with a porn addiction to try and numb it. So I wouldn't have to care, so I wouldn't have to feel pain, so I wouldn't have to be angry. But of course, then that leaves you with a dead heart. So then you try and jumpstart your heart again and try and care again. I'm going to put some effort in. Of course, that leads to seeing sin and injustice, and it turns to pain. Pain then turned to anger, and I had to numb the anger, turn back to your addiction, which has continued to lead to a dead heart. I looked like both those sons when I showed up in Sheboygan. Part of me wanted to be angry because I did right things. Part of me wanted to be angry with God because I wanted to do my own thing. In the midst of that, I found that God cares more. That he cared about those things more than I cared about them. And that he cares about his creation more than we are ever capable. I don't know what you care about this morning. If it's your family, your spouse, your kids, relationships, how you spend money, career choices, the justice, injustice of things, physical health, the church, this church, politics. God cares about his creation more than we ever can. And that even though God didn't fix it the way I wanted to see him fix stuff, when I want him to fix it, how I want him to fix it, that doesn't mean God doesn't care. In fact, he's continuing to show me because of how he loves his creation, he does care more. Number 2, Jesus is full of grace and truth. So when you begin to see Jesus more clearly, it's because I had a pretty warped vision of who Jesus was. Who is this man breaking into the human story? Who is this Jesus? When you begin to see him not through a lens of shame, but through a lens of forgiveness. John 1:14 says, when describing who this Jesus is, it says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." Often we put things into binary thinking. It's either this or that, one or the other, one or two. Hot or cold, night or day. But Jesus is not grace or truth. He's not nice or tough. He's not the let the little children come to me and then table flipping Jesus. He's the same. He's grace and he is truth. He is cruciform love. A radical love that continues to amaze me day in and day out. someone who would meet me in my sin and loneliness and isolation and invite me to walk out of it. And every time I run back to it, he walks back to where I'm at to gently guide me out of it. Jesus is far deeper than I have ever thought and continue to imagine who he is. Number 3, God does a work in you before he works through you. A verse I've read hundreds of times is Ephesians 2:10. At least I thought I've read it hundreds and hundreds of times, especially growing up in a church. It says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them." And like many Americans, I get the whole, he's got good works prepared for us to walk in them. So this must be about, I got stuff to do. So Jesus, what stuff do you have for me to do? Is the question I would ask. And I would try and fill my life with doing stuff for God. And that would leave me pretty empty. And I started paying attention to the first part of that verse, that we are God's workmanship. We are God's masterpiece. So I started asking different questions. I started asking, Lord, what are you creating in me? How do I pay attention to that? Does the Lord seem more interested in my heart than just what my hands could do? So as I started to pay attention to all that injustice that I felt inside of me, I've learned to call it a holy dissatisfaction. I'm not okay, Lord, because heaven is not completely on earth yet. Your kingdom is not fully arrived. He is the one who put some of that dissatisfaction in my heart so he could show me things. And as I started paying attention to that, I had sat down with a couple pastors and they said, Sam, we see some things inside of you. We see some giftedness. And we think God is calling you to be a pastor. And my reaction is, nope, I ain't doing that. And we had more conversation and went round and round. So I said, all right, if God's calling me to be a pastor, I'm giving God like 3 days. I'm not going to drag this out for months and months and months. We're either doing this or not. So I went to bed Saturday night, fairly confident I'm going to have to say yes. And I woke the next morning from a message from my sister who's studying abroad in Thailand, the other side of the world ahead of us in time. And she said, I wanted you to know in church this morning, God said you're going to be a pastor. She's like, I don't know why, just FYI, heads up. And I didn't tell her I was praying about it. I didn't tell her that's what I was wrestling through. And I can look back now, not just through the last 9 years, but through life and see how God was creating those things inside of me. Where is he at work in you? After all, number 4, you are not what you do. You are who God says you are. You are not what you do. You are who God says you are. It's interesting when you start paying attention to voices in your life. I like how Ricardo Sanchez put it. He says, the devil knows your name, but he calls you by your sin. God knows your sin, but he calls you by your name. When you are under stress, when there is pressure in the room you find yourself in, what name shows up? Is it stupid, moron, idiot? Or is it my beloved child? It's in John 10 that Jesus says that he is the good shepherd, and that he goes out ahead of his sheep, and he calls them by name. See, the Lord knows your name, and he's not going to call you by anything than that. He's not going to call you anything besides who you are. It is often our own anxiety, our own sin, our own selfishness, our own pride that tells us we got to do something to make a difference in this world, to not live a life of insignificance. And yet the Lord is out there calling you by name before you've even lifted a finger. Number 5, the gospel of Jesus Christ is about receiving it. So learn how to receive. It's in Psalm 23. The psalmist writes about his relationship to God and draws the comparison of a sheep being taken care for by a shepherd. And then it takes a slight turn, and he says that you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. And this is the part that I still don't fully understand. Everything I've ever desired, want, or need is found in receiving it from the Lord. Everything that says, I'm not going to be okay until I have fill in the blank, I have found when I commune with the living God. It's parts of that I don't really understand. That when I come with a posture of saying, Lord, I am empty, would you fill me? It changes a room. When the manifesting presence of God shows up, brings me to my knees, tears in my eyes. It's when a community of people holds to that posture that the power of God seems to be unleashed for some reason. And when it's absent, it's not because the Lord is absent. It's because often it's because we're trying to do things in our own strength. And the Lord could be offering it to us, and we have no idea. And I have found time and time again that there's a table to feast at. That there is a cup that overflows. It's not just about learning how to receive from God. It also requires an openness to receive from others. I have a very distinct memory of a mentor giving me some feedback about something that I did, and he said, "Hey, you did a really good job with that." And I went, "Okay." And he went, "No." He says, "You say, 'Thank you. I received that.'" I was like, "Oh, okay. Thank you. I received that." Oh, man, that was so awkward. It was so uncomfortable. And then the next time, I knew it was coming. This time I was ready for the feedback, and I said, "Thank you. I received that." You see, I don't like receiving help from people because that means I need other people. It means that I'm not totally self-sufficient, can last on my own. Learning how to receive means learning how to receive what others are offering. Number 6, discover your blind spots. A couple years ago now, I was challenged by a high school punk to a spicy eating competition called the One Chip Challenge. And if you've experienced the One Chip Challenge, you know what you're in for. It's essentially a genetic modified cracker that's blue, like I'm talking like Smurf blue, that you're supposed to eat. So we both agreed we're going to go 20 minutes, and then it's a draw. Otherwise, it's the first person who needs to drink something loses. And, you know, Mama didn't raise no wimp, so I was going to let this guy show me up. So we eat this cracker, well, chip thing. And it's the worst tasting thing I've ever experienced. And my mouth is on fire, because that's the only word that you can use to describe such heat. And I start pacing right here, back and forth. And I decide I can mentally leave the room. I won't feel it as much. So even though I physically am pacing back and forth, my mouth is on fire, I think I put my mind in another state. I don't know what was going on. And I thought my mouth was the biggest problem I had, but I was so wrong. The biggest problem I had was not the pain in my mouth, but the pain in my stomach. Started small, started to increase and increase and increase. And now my stomach is on fire more than my mouth is on fire. 20 minutes goes by, call it a draw, start chugging milk. Kind of helps my mouth. It does nothing for my stomach. We go to Culver's, throw down Butterburger, fries, whole shake. And it was after all that I realized I'm in trouble. So I go home, and I get all that comes back out. This time it had changed the color to blue, and my mouth is on fire again. See, what I thought was something I was anticipating, I can handle the heat in my mouth, but my body was not ready for the heat in my stomach. It's not if you have blind spots. It's that you will discover blind spots. Some of them come in the form of a food challenge, but they start as simple as your words. As in Proverbs 10:19 says, "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent." as a young, ambitious guy, had no idea the weight of my words, the type of words and how I used them. I used to finish other people's sentences for them just so I could hear myself talk again. I used to use very aggressive words and verbiage to try and get a result that I wanted. I didn't care the cost because I didn't even know what the cost was. I had a massive blind spot. In emotional health, emotional maturity, I may have been 24, 25, but emotionally I looked like I was 12. I like how Pete Scazzaro puts it. He says, emotional health and spiritual maturity are inseparable. It is not possible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. One of the reasons why worship music doesn't seem to be helpful connecting to God anymore, or sermons speak to your heart, well, that prayer just feels like an empty silence, is because no matter how hard you try spiritually, emotionally, you've built up a giant wall with God. And that you can look 30, 40, 50, 60 years old and have an ability to look like you're emotionally 12. And I have found I am on an emotional journey to grow up. Other blind spots include framework, mental maps, ways of understanding how complex our world is. Not everything fits into a cute little box that you can put on your shelf. Every human being is unique. It's not just a cute saying, but every human being is wired differently. Their family of origin, their culture, their faith journey, how they experience the world. And that starts with yourself. And you will need help understanding yourself. After all, that's where Jesus is at work inside of you. Number 7, ask questions of compassionate curiosity. And you ask them of God. Because if God can't handle your questions, then you got too small of a God. When Adam and Eve sin, the first thing out of God's mouth was, "Where are you?" When people start following Jesus, Jesus asks them, "What do you want me to do for you?" God models for us what compassionate curiosity looks like. Then you can ask God the tough questions. The ones about doubt. The ones that bring you to tears. Ask questions of compassionate curiosity of yourself. Like how the late Tim Keller put it. He said, "We cannot know God without knowing ourselves, and we cannot know ourselves without knowing God." Those two kinds of knowledge are interdependent. They rise and fall together. Ask questions about what's going on inside of your heart, of the things that you are motivated by. because there again you will find God at work. And ask questions of compassionate curiosity of others. Why do other people do what they do? And what I have found is that everyone's story makes sense. Not that I fully understand them, but everyone's story makes sense. They've all walked the journey. They've all experienced life in different shapes and forms. Ask them about it. Lesson number 8. Discipleship to Jesus is similar to that of an electrical apprenticeship. It's like an electrical apprenticeship. See, in what we call the Great Commission verses in Matthew 28, Jesus said to go and make disciples. He did not say go and make converts of a new religion. He said make disciples. And so for me, I grew up in a church. And so discipleship was associated with going to essentially a program at church. And so I thought discipleship was the word that was talking about how you grow at church. It's about knowing stuff. It's about having a certain way of doing things. It's talking with a specific vocabulary. You know how to act a certain way. And it's just like if you knew how to do all that stuff, that's what a disciple of Jesus meant. And I couldn't be farther from the truth. And I've learned that discipleship looks a lot more like my journey as an electrician. When I started off, I was painfully bad at it. I'm talking like struggling to read tape measures, struggling to keep up with what was going on, because I didn't understand the language. I didn't understand the tools that we use. I didn't understand the material. I didn't understand how things worked. I was bad at it. I got a lot of talkings to. Because then when you hang out with electricians, they begin to show me some things. So I started paying attention to what they were saying. And you end up taking classes, you read some books, and you put into practice all those things. You start to get some experience, some confidence. And at the end, I'm starting to be a halfway decent electrician. And I would look at guys who were electricians who've been doing it for almost 40 years, and they would tell me, you'll never learn everything. There were guys who were electricians for 40 years, and they go, I'm still learning new stuff. That's what it looks like to be a disciple, an apprentice to Jesus. When we start, we are painfully bad at it. That's just where we start. We don't really understand the language. We don't even really understand the tools available to us. So if you start hanging out with other disciples of Jesus, you start practicing it, you can start to look like that. Maybe 40, 50 years from now, you can be the person saying, I'm just starting to learn what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Number 9, build joyous relationships. And a joyous relationship is one where there's mutual care, that I care for you and you care for me. Those are the greatest things. Those will always be the best things. Not any event or activity. but the joyous relationships who I've had the honor of walking with for a season of life. Whether that be a season of grief, grieving the loss of human life, moments of joy and bliss and laughter. I will always cherish the companions that have been on this journey for the last 9 years, or if we've been walking together for a few months. I will always be grateful for that. And the tough part about joyous relationships is not every relationship will be joyous. But that's also what makes the joyous relationships that much more precious. It's a weird feeling going back to go start a church. Because we will go back, not the same people. And it's weird because I don't think anybody knows where we're going. Anybody knows who we are. They're not going to care about the things we learned. And why should they? They don't know us from a hole in the ground. And it's a weird feeling knowing that your lives have changed. And you want to tell the world about it. And you're not always sure how. So I want to say thank you for being that place where we had that first awkward experience of sitting with a group of people we did not know. And it becoming the greatest adventure of our lives. I don't know what God's taught you here in this place. These are just a few of the things He's taught me. And I'm so grateful for them. So, would you just join me in prayer? And we're just going to pray a prayer of just gratitude, thankfulness. And I just want to invite you to look back in your own life. Some of the things that the Lord has shown you. people that have walked with you. Seasons that were amazing and seasons that were a struggle. And then out of this place of gratitude, of thankfulness, I want to challenge you to go on. I want to invite you to continue the journey that God has for you, to continue to pay attention to where God is at work in your life, to continue to lean in to questions, to continue to lean in to find out that God really cares more. And I can rest in that, and you can rest in that. So, Lord, we give you our attention. And just like that father in that parable, you do not just write your boys off and tell them to grow up. But you open your arms wide and invited them in. Because you long to be with them. You long to be with us. And Lord, we confess we don't always understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and it's confusing in human wisdom. So, Lord, may we learn to trust. May we learn to trust that voice that calls us by name. May we learn to trust the walk in your ways. May we learn to trust and receive what you have for us. Lord, may we learn to celebrate your goodness with gratitude and thanksgiving about what you've done. Lord, we're so excited about what you're going to do through this. The impact that you're going to make here through this church. So, Lord, I asked, would you do it again? Would you continue to transform lives and meet people in their isolation and in their loneliness and their disillusionment? And would you set them free? Would you do it 100-fold, Lord? Would you just come and move? Lord, we invite you to speak. We are listening.
Sing a closing song, and whether you feel led to stand or to sit or just worship however you see fit.